Welcome back to Combat Mission Shock Force 2, where we're going to take a quick look at German Panzergrenadier platoons. These are definitely skewed towards the shootier end of the firepower versus manpower spectrum of mechanised infantry, and that means that they come with some interesting tactical caveats. The first of these is that the dismounted element is split into 6-man sections. In combat missions, these are organised into a 4-man fire team backed up by a 2-man team, though you can alter the exact distribution by splitting the squad down in different ways. The fire team is made up of the section leader, armed with a G36 assault rifle, a light machine gunner with an MG4, a grenadier who carries a G36 with an underbarrel AG36 40mm grenade launcher, and an anti-tank specialist armed with a G36 and carrying a Panzerfaust 3 IT. We covered all these weapons looking at the Gebirgsjäger in the last video. The G36 is a 5.56 assault rifle with integrated optics. The MG4 is analogous to the M249 SAW, being a 5.56 belt-fed light machine gun with a bipod, though it does have the same optic as the G36. The AG36 is analogous to the American M203 grenade launcher, though it only has high explosive ammunition available. And finally, the Panzerfaust 3 IT is vaguely analogous to the RPG-7, being a reusable firing tube with front-loading rockets, though it stands out from the old Soviet offering by incorporating modern features such as a fire control computer, laser rangefinder, night vision optics, a backblast neutralizing countermass system, and tandem heat warheads as standard. The TLDR for all that is that if you can connect with any of the Syrian tanks in Shock Force with the Panzerfaust, it has a very good chance of taking them out. The 2-man B team in the basic section is made up of a second anti-tank specialist and a rifleman. Functionally speaking, this is just 2 riflemen because the AT specialist doesn't have a Panzerfaust. There's only 1 per section and it's carried by the other specialist. There aren't any other AT weapons carried in the vehicles either, so it's a little bit strange. These sections carry 2,450 rounds of 5.56, 20 40mm high explosive grenades for the AG36 and a single Panzerfaust 3 rocket. As with the Gebirgsjäger, this organisation applies to the 3rd and 4th sections in the platoon. The 2nd section replaces the MG4 with an MG3 and loses one of the AT specialists. The MG3 is basically the MG42 of World War II fame, rechambered for NATO 762x51. It's got a very high rate of fire and can reach out further than the 5.56 weapons, but it's only operating in the light role with a bipod and it lacks an optic, so it's not really in a position to put effective fire down at longer ranges. The 2nd section obviously has an altered ammo loadout, dropping about 1,400 rounds of 5.56 in exchange for 700 rounds of 7.62. Finally, the 1st section A team incorporates the platoon leader. The MG4 is replaced by a radio operator with a G36 and the AT specialist is replaced by a rifleman. The B team meanwhile is basically a sniper team. We have 1 standard rifleman and a marksman armed with either a G22 or a G82. The G22 is the Arctic Warfare Magnum with the folding stock, chambered in .300 Winchester Magnum. The G82 is the American M107 Barrett, which is an anti-material rifle firing 50 caliber ammunition. This ammunition is specifically Raufoss Mark 211, which is a high explosive incendiary armor piercing round. Very, very expensive, but capable of poking holes in and doing significant internal damage to lightly armoured vehicles. Both of these weapons are technically quite long ranged, 1100 meters for the G22 and 1800 for the G82, but as usual actually spotting and hitting a target at those ranges is quite optimistic. The G22 comes with 35 rounds. For some reason the G82 comes with 70, so there's only one real option there. As you would expect for NATO infantry, everyone has night vision equipment and body armour, etc, etc. Each section is carried in a Marder 1. The original vehicle entered service in 1971, so it was developed in the same kind of hyper-mechanised Cold War context as the Soviet BMP and the later American Bradley and British Warrior. In Shock Force 2 we have 2 variants, the 1A3 introduced in 1988, which added some extra armour, and the 1A5 which entered production in 2003 and added extra protection against mine strikes. These 2 variants are basically identical as far as the combat mission context is concerned. We'll start with the fun bit, the armament. This is the second caveat to the Platoon. The Marder is relatively small as IFVs go. The reason there's only space for 6 dismounts is that it's quite heavily armed. All the weapons are mounted in the turret. This has a somewhat unconventional design because it separates the crew and the weapons. The commander and gunner sit in a kind of low-profile rotating cupola that has the weapon systems and optics on top. This keeps the weight and profile of the turret down, but it also makes it pretty cramped inside and leaves the weapons on top outside the armour, so they are more vulnerable than weapons on other IFVs. The Marder is principally armed with a 20mm RH-202 autocannon from Rheinmetall. This is basically the MG42 of autocannons. It's got a blistering rate of fire of up to 1,000 rounds per minute, and it's supplied with both high explosive and armour-piercing ammunition via a dual feed. The RH-202 will absolutely shred enemy infantry and light vehicles. It's also surprisingly effective at chewing through buildings and scouring the subsystems off of more heavily armoured targets like tanks. Speaking of shooting at tanks, both of Shock Force's Marder variants have Milan 3 ATGM posts mounted to the turret as standard. Milan is a wire-guided SACLOS weapon with a maximum range of 2,000 meters, firing tandem heat rockets, meaning that it will punch through explosive reactive armor. The downside is that it has a minimum range of 200 meters, and that it can't be operated from inside the turret. This is a similar problem to the one the BMP-1P has, and for the same reason. Like the AT-4 on that vehicle, the Milan here is literally just bolted on, and someone will have to open a hatch and expose themselves to incoming fire if they're going to fire and reload it. The key difference in the Marder's favour, however, is that the Milan is operated by the vehicle commander and not the gunner. This means that, unlike the BMP, you don't lose the ability to fire the vehicle's other weapons when the ATGM is in action, or if the ATGM operator becomes a casualty. Also worth noting that in reality the Milan can be dismounted and used by the infantry. That's not an option in combat mission. Finally, the turret also features an MG3 machine gun. I guess this is a coaxial mount, even though it's on the other side of the weapon mount from the cannon. Regardless, it's the same MG3 as used by the infantry, with the notable caveat that, being vehicle mounted, it takes advantage of a much more stable firing platform and the Marder's optics, so it has a functionally much greater effective range. Note that this is a more stable firing platform compared to the infantry, and only when stationary. The Marder's weapons are not stabilised, so its accuracy really suffers on the move. Both the integral weapons and the Milan have thermal optics. Overall, the Marders carry about 1,000 rounds of HE ammo for the cannon, along with 250 rounds of APDS, 6 Milan missiles, and several thousand rounds of 7.62 for the coax. In between the cannon and the MG, we have a bank of smoke launchers. In Shock Force, these get a single charge and deploy a smoke screen about 40 meters forward of the turret's frontal arc. This smoke is not thermal blocking, so you can pop smoke and engage through it with some impunity if you're up against an enemy that doesn't have thermals. In terms of physical protection, the Marders are proof against 30mm cannon fire to the front, but not the sides, and in no arc against anything nastier, to include RPGs and ATGMs of all kinds. So pretty standard NATO-style IFV protection, notably there isn't any add-on or explosive reactive armour that might mitigate that. Putting the Marder 1A5 through the vehicle mobility test, it scored a pretty impressive 456 points. Lower scores are better here. For context, it's sitting between the BMP-2 and the BMP-3 at 499 and 434 respectively. It did do noticeably well in the slalom. Most vehicles have a hard time with all the turns there, so it's on the more manoeuvrable side. The layout of the vehicle is very conventional. Driver up front on the left with the engine on his right. Turret centrally mounted behind them with the gunner on the left and the commander on the right. Then we get to the rear compartment, which has space for 6 dismounts. These enter and exit via a ramp at the back. There are 3 roof hatches on top, but these are non-functional in combat mission. This is a bit of a shame because it makes for a nice mobile foxhole with some added protection to the front thanks to the turret. I think the Pixel Trapper would appreciate being able to stand up as well, because that rear compartment seems very cramped. Something not helped by a mostly back-to-back central seating arrangement instead of the inward-facing seats you get in Bradley and Warrior. The trade-off for that, however, is better visibility for the dismounts, who have plenty of viewing slits. The obligatory extra ammunition for the dismounts consists of more than 2,000 rounds of 5.56, 4,000 rounds of 7.62, which is shared with the coax, 88 40mm grenades, and another 3 Panzerfaust rockets. The crew themselves all have night vision and are armed with G36Ks, which are the carbine versions of the standard G36. So that's a quick once-over of the German Panzergrenadier platoon as modelled in Shock Force 2. Definitely one of those units where the vehicles and dismounts will have to work together. With 6 men per section, the individual dismounted elements are just not strong enough to soak up casualties, but the payoff for the small section size is being able to bring that RH-202 cannon to the party. This isn't an uncommon dynamic of mechanised infantry TOEs. All IFVs have limited internal space and they need to find a balance point between firepower and passenger capacity. There are advantages and disadvantages to skewing in either direction. Which way to go depends an awful lot on what the IFVs are intended to be used for. In an ideal world, it feels very much like the Marder is there to do all the heavy lifting, while the infantry are there to mop up what's left and make sure nobody sneaks up on the vehicles. How that translates into practice, given the way the terrain tends to conspire to separate different elements, is another question. But it is one we can take a stab at answering when the Panzergrenadiers tackle the platoon patrol. I'll leave a link to that video down below when it's ready. Hope you all enjoyed this one and found it interesting. If you'd like to see these videos early and support the channel, you can do so via Patreon and YouTube memberships. Whether you do or not, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.